The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband by Dr. A. Ahmed. This narration continues the story The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Poor Indian Girl. It was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is a tale narrated in 6 books. Book 2. The Arab Sugar Daddy turns into the Granddaddy the Devil. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by the reviewer, who may quote brief passages from the review for printing in a general newspaper or magazine, a school journal, or a university article. All characters in this novel are fictitious and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 11. Investigations conducted by the CIA team. With the arrest of the U.S. Congressman's son, the White House mobilized the CIA, which in turn contacted the highest police authority in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to demand the immediate release of the senator's son, Mr. Alexander Thomas. Initially, Saudi police authorities refused to release him, but when the king intervened, Joshua Thomas was released and taken directly to Jeddah International Airport and sent on the next flight to his home country. Husband Joshua Thomas arrived in the United States of America before the body of his murdered wife, Shama, arrived. He was deported from Saudi Arabia against his wishes. He was willing to stay behind and fight his late wife's case. Upon his arrival in New York, and given the conditions of his imprisonment, he was interviewed by several leading news bureaus. He spoke to the media about the reason for his wife's assassination. He also convinced his father to ask the CIA to send a qualified team of investigators to investigate the suspicious death of an American citizen on Saudi soil. Shortly after widowed husband Joshua's arrival, his wife's remains arrived in New York. Shama's mother, Susan Haddad, came from Baghdad to attend her daughter's funeral. Even her Iraqi husband, Andre Haddad, came with her. Once the burial was over, a team of 7 members of the CIA arrived in Jeddah and began their investigation into the murder of Senator Alexander Thomas's daughter-in-law. It is a mixed team of males and females. Joshua had already briefed the CIA team and had a general idea of what had happened. Their first step on Saudi soil was to force the Jeddah police to include Joshua's statements, especially regarding the Somali driver who beat and killed his wife. He stated that he met the Somali driver and spoke with him in the office of the second suspect, Sheikh Ahmed, and received his card. He gave the Somali man's card to the CIA team. Joshua had the foresight to hand over the recorded conversation between his late wife and Sheikh Ahmed regarding the Indian maid's missing young daughter. When this was achieved, the CIA team attempted to interrogate the Somali driver. The Jeddah police's knee-jerk response was to obstruct the investigation and prevent the meeting. When the Americans threatened to inform the royal family about this matter, the Saudis responded and allowed them to speak to the detained Somali man. During interrogation by the experienced American team, the Somali driver changed his statements. He substantiated Joshua's claims and admitted that he was sober and not intoxicated when he struck the white woman. To escape guilt, he claimed he was speeding when he lost control of the steering wheel and hit the white woman. However, the CIA investigation team remained unconvinced of his innocence. Then the American team informed him that his Saudi sponsor or employer had already made a statement stating that he was drunk when he drove his car and hit the foreign woman. The Somali man was shocked when he heard such an unreasonable statement from his Saudi sponsor. It turned out to him that the Saudi sponsor, Sheikh Ahmed, deceived him and testified against him. All this time, he was under the impression that it was the Jeddah police who imprisoned him on charges of drinking alcohol and driving like a foolish foreign driver. He thought that Sheikh Ahmed had been supporting his claim all this time that he lost control of the car and accidentally hit the white woman. This is what his Saudi sponsor trained with him on. Devastated, the now detained Somali driver saw that his Saudi sponsor, Sheikh Ahmed, wanted to wash his hands of this serious issue and use him as a scapegoat. He understood that if he remained silent and did not reveal Sheikh Ahmed's incitement to him to kill the American woman, he would either be beheaded for premeditated murder or he might remain in the Saudi prison indefinitely. The only option available to him is to tell the truth and implicate his Saudi sponsor as the first accused and him as the second. He believed that the sentence would be divided between them, otherwise Sheikh Ahmed would be more guilty because he was the mastermind of the premeditated crime, and he was merely an accomplice in the crime. So, the suspected Somali driver, abdicator Ibrahim Saleh, took the only option left to him and told the CIA team the truth, admitting that he had run over the white foreign woman to kill her, and explaining exactly why he had done so. Everything he narrated was recorded by the American team that investigated him. The CIA did not disclose this additional information to Jeddah police or the media, as investigations are still ongoing. They demanded the interrogation of the second accused, Sheikh Fayez bin Ahmed. Once they were sure that Sheikh Ahmed had deliberately killed the late American scientist Shama Abdul Bari Ahmed, they needed a motive. The testimony of her American husband Joshua gave them an idea of the circumstances surrounding wife Shama's murder. Still, now they are keen to find out who Rahana Khan is and where the Saudi man hid her young daughter of it. Before meeting the old Saudi, they called Joshua Alexander Thomas and asked him where his late wife had met the mother of the missing little Indian girl. Joshua told them that Shama met Rahana Khan in the women's prison in Jeddah and interviewed her regarding her upcoming stoning sentence. He then sent them a copy of the interview he found on his late wife's laptop. Through the interview, the CIA team was able to build a preliminary picture of both prisoner Rahana and her daughter Ifit. Their first suspicion is that the Saudi sponsor, Sheikh Ahmed, nailed his Indian maid for a false crime, sent her to prison, and sentenced her to death by stoning because he wanted to rape her young daughter. Like Shama and Joshua, the team speculated that Sheikh Ahmed was hiding the underage Indian girl somewhere so he could rape her without arousing suspicion. The logical conclusion was that when Shama discovered his carefully hidden secret, the Saudi sheikh decided to kill her before she could implicate him in the Jeddah police on charges of kidnapping and raping a young Indian girl. The CIA team expected that if they confronted Sheikh Ahmed directly about his heinous crimes, he might kill the underage girl and get rid of the evidence. And so, they began searching for the little girl's whereabouts. A mobile phone recording of the conversation between the late young American woman, Shama, and the old Saudi man, Sheikh Ahmed, gave them the first clues. Analyzing the conversation, they suspected that he had made up a story about sending the minor daughter to her relatives in India. The team felt that the little girl was never sent to India and made plans to confirm this theory. At this stage of the investigation, they asked to meet the Indian maid who had been sentenced to stoning and who was working as a servant in the house of the second accused, Sheikh Ahmed. This time Jeddah police did not try to prevent them from meeting Rahana Khan. On that day, the American team met with the convicted Indian maid, Rahana Khan, who was only 1 month away from the date of her execution by stoning to death. Rahana recounted being raped by 2 Jeddah police officers upon her arrival in Saudi Arabia. She told them about the false accusation that she was a professional prostitute, which prompted the Sharia court to sentence her to death by stoning. However, she begged the team to find her daughter and bring her to her so she could see her before she was killed. Rahana's tragic story touched a chord with many members of the CIA team, bringing hot tears to the faces of some who had never cried before. Her testimony convinced the 7-member team of her innocence. When the team narrated her sponsor's claim that he had sent her daughter to her relatives in Mumbai, Rahana refused to believe his story. She said her daughter would not be able to find her way from Mumbai International Airport to her shack in the Dharavi slum area. No one else could bring her daughter back to her poor hut except her. As for the Indian man, Mr. Muhammad Khan, who was an agent of her Saudi sponsor, he does not know where she lives, and he did not know or find where her daughter lived before she came with her to Saudi Arabia. Rahana concluded her statement by saying that her Saudi sponsor lied about sending her daughter Ifit to India. The members of the CIA team found themselves faced with crimes more serious than the murder of the wife of the son of U.S. Senator Alexander Thomas. They understood that the only way to prevent the Jeddah court from stoning the innocent Indian woman was to expose her Saudi sponsor and find out where he hid her young daughter. As before, they do not want to question Sheikh Ahmed before locating the little girl. His conversation with the late American woman, Shama, gave them some clues about where the Saudi man was likely hiding the underage girl. In this recording, Sheikh Ahmed was heard telling Shama that he had sent the daughter of his convict Indian maid to Mumbai. However, when Shama asked him for proof, he showed her copies of the 2 flight tickets issued to the daughter of his Indian maid and his former Pakistani driver. The tickets showed that the daughter and the driver traveled through India and the Philippines, but their final destination was Asmara, Eritrea, not Mumbai. The team decided that they had to check this discrepancy and find out if the old man had hidden the little girl somewhere in Eritrea. The first logical step for the American team is Asmara International Airport. They inquired about the arrival of the 2 passengers under investigation from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, Sabir Ibrahim Shah and Ifat Khan. The Asmara International Airport Authority confirmed to them the arrival of the 2 foreign passengers mentioned above 3 years ago. Once Ifat Khan's arrival in Eritrea was confirmed, the CIA team contacted the Eritrean police in Asmara and reported the kidnapping of a minor Indian girl by a Pakistani man. Within 24 hours, Asmara police contacted the American team and informed them that the 11-year-old Indian girl, Ifat Khan, had been found and that the Pakistani man, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, had been arrested. When Asmara police interrogated him, the Pakistani man claimed that he did not kidnap the Indian girl, but that his Saudi sponsor in Jeddah ordered him to bring her to him in the city of Asmara. After they arrived in Eritrea, his Arab sponsor married the underage Indian girl, who was then 7 years old, and she remained imprisoned in his huge palace for 3 years in the Eritrean capital, Asmara. The CIA team informed Asmara police that the detained underage girl had been kidnapped from her Indian mother in Jeddah and sent to Eritrea. Then the American team demanded that the child, who was freed from her place of imprisonment, be sent to Jeddah as soon as possible. They asked the same thing about sending the Pakistani man, who was also an accomplice in these serious crimes that amounted to the kidnapping, rape, and detention of a minor Indian girl named Ifat Khan. Chapter 12. Their victory is short-lived. After revealing the entire plot of the evil Saudi old man Sheikh Fayez bin Ahmed, members of the CIA congratulated each other on their great work and celebrated their clever discovery of one of the most mysterious and complex crimes committed by a human being on the planet Earth. Their happiness only increased when they realized that the whole world would praise them for saving an Indian woman from stoning to death and freeing her minor child from the hands of an old Arab man in Deauville who had kidnapped, held, and raped her. The world will also appreciate their efforts in proving the crime of the old Saudi man who killed the daughter-in-law of U.S. Senator Alexander Thomas. Accordingly, the 7 CIA members opened bottles of champagne and drank and danced late into the night. When everything became clear as the sun, the team handed over a copy of their investigations and demanded that Sheikh Fayez bin Ahmed be arrested and charged with those serious crimes that he committed against 3 innocent foreign women, Rayhana, Ifat, and Shama. Once the CIA team submitted its official report to the Saudi police, Sheikh Ahmed was placed under arrest. Shortly after his arrest, his underage victim, Ifat Khan, and his vile Pakistani pimp, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, were returned to Jeddah. Members of the CIA team appeared on various international television channels and revealed the heinous crimes committed by a wealthy Saudi businessman against 3 innocent foreign women from India and America. But the victory, happiness, and celebration for the CIA team members did not last long. Sheikh Ahmed was arrested and interrogated by Jeddah police and then released on bail 24 hours later. He was sponsored by his eldest son, Dr. Abdul Bari Ahmed, who traveled by air from Riyadh to Jeddah and came to rescue his father. After questioning him about allegations of kidnapping, raping, and detaining the child of his former Indian maid, the Jeddah police waived these serious crimes and released him. He was able to prove to the Saudi police that he legally married the child, Ifat Khan, when she was 7 years old, and gave her enough time legally before he entered into her and had intercourse with her. He also admitted that he had intercourse with her with young female children for a year, by the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, based on his marriage to his child wife, Aisha, when she was 6 years old. Then he started having real intercourse with her when she completed 9 years of legal age. The old Arab husband challenged the police to find out from his fourth wife, Ifat Khan, whether he had sex with her before she became a sodomite at the age of 9. He strongly denied that he bribed his former Somali driver and convinced him to beat and kill the late American woman, Shama Abdul Bari Ahmed. He claimed that the CIA team convinced his detained Somali driver to change his statements because they promised to release him from Saudi prison and send him as a refugee migrant resettled in the United States. When the underage Indian wife Ifat Khan arrived in Jeddah from Asmara, she was 11 years old and pregnant. She became pregnant by her kidnapper and rapist. She had been in a horrible child marriage for 3 long years. Members of the CIA team were shocked when they learned that the Jeddah police had released Sheikh Ahmed and allowed him to take back his child wife. Their consciences were even more disturbed when they learned that the child, Ifat, was pregnant with his child when she was 11 years old. They also learned that Jeddah police dropped charges of kidnapping, rape, and forcible detention against the elderly Saudi man, al-Badawi. In addition to all of this, he was able to convince the Jeddah police that his Somali driver was the one who killed the American woman while he was drinking illegal local liquor and driving his car while drunk. Accordingly, the 7 members of the CIA team stormed the Jeddah police headquarters and demanded the immediate arrest of the kidnapper and rapist and the release of his minor victim. If they had not been from the USA, the Jeddah police would surely have arrested all 7 members of the CIA team and beheaded them with an executioner's sword or stoned them the following Friday. The American team went so far as to call the Jeddah police barbarians, scoundrels, animals, monsters, criminals, sexual deviants, and filthy pedophiles, and openly addressed them with other curse words, and some showed them the middle finger. An American female member of the CIA team said in her rage that if the Indian maid's child was not released from her Saudi kidnapper and rapist within 24 hours, the U.S. Marines would move out of Iraq and Syria and invade Saudi Arabia and then blow up all the mentally retarded, sexual deviants and all men. Saudis who have sex with children. Regardless of the words they used and the threats they made, the CIA team was unable to change the decision of the Jeddah police. Finally, the American team decided to refer the serious case to the royal family. Wisely, they also involved the Indian government. First, the CIA team drafted a massive report on the entire story of the 3 foreigners, Rehana, Ifat, and Shama. Then they uploaded it to the internet and spread it around the world. Rehana's stoning conviction has drawn the attention and sympathy of millions of people. Her photo and tragic story were circulated through emails and Messenger, YouTube, Facebook, Clubhouse, and TikTok. As a result, the outside world demanded an end to the stoning of the innocent Indian maid. Moreover, the world demanded the release of the daughter of the Indian servant, Rehana Khan, who was a minor child wife, freed from her rapist, the old Saudi man Sheikh Ahmed. Second, the CIA team complained to the royal family. Third, they referred the case of the minor foreign wife to the Indian government through the Indian consulate in Jeddah and the Indian embassy in Riyadh. As a result, the royal family suspended the implementation of the stoning penalty for convicted foreign worker Rehana Khan and ordered the Jeddah police to investigate the Indian maid's claim that she conceived an illegitimate child through rape by 2 Saudi police officers when she came with her daughter to the kingdom. Furthermore, the royal family issued a decree that the same foreign woman must be retried in a Jeddah court on charges of being married to 2 husbands at the same time. The Indian embassy in Riyadh and the Indian consulate in Jeddah also intervened jointly and demanded the immediate release of the Indian minor girl, Ifat Khan, who was allegedly kidnapped, forcibly detained and raped by an old Saudi man who was her mother's sponsor. Despite these two official demands, the Jeddah police rejected the demands of the Indian ambassador and consul. Regardless, pregnant child wife Ifat Khan was taken away from her legal husband Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed after the royal family ordered her release. The royal family also ordered the Sharia court to hold a new hearing on the validity of the marriage of elderly Saudi Sheikh Ahmed and Indian girl Ifat Khan and rule accordingly. Meanwhile, a young pregnant girl, Ifat, was placed in a women's prison in Jeddah, but not as a suspect. She was not allowed to see or meet her imprisoned mother, convicted of adultery and stoning, Rahana Khan. The Saudi police or the Women's Prison Administration cannot keep a minor Indian girl in any Saudi home for fear of being raped by a male member. Moreover, no Muslim family in Saudi Arabia or outside it can adopt her because Islam forbids adoption. If the court announces her marriage to her Saudi husband, the Jeddah police plan to hand her over to the Indian consulate to ship her to Bombay, and when she is there, let the Indian police authority do what they want to do with her. Meanwhile, in homes, workplaces, mosques, schools, and all over the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, other Middle Eastern countries, North Africa, and even the remaining 57 Islamic countries, a great uproar was caused by the news of a Muslim wife's child being separated from her legitimate Muslim husband because he is an elderly man. The imams of Saudi mosques delivered their sermons publicly and condemned the royal family for allowing the CIA to interfere in the legitimate Islamic judicial system in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is the holiest and purest Islamic country on the planet because it contains the lands of the Hijaz, such as the cities of Mecca and Medina. They said that the marriage of an old Saudi man and a minor Indian Muslim girl is permissible in all respects, and there was nothing in the marriage contract between them that contradicted Sharia law. As is usual in all Islamic countries, the protesters cited the example of the marriage of the Prophet Muhammad to the child Aisha, whom he married when she was 6 years old and had intercourse with her when she was 9. The condemning sermons of Muslim clerics moved the hearts of the vast Islamic masses and caused great chaos and anxiety throughout the Saudi lands of the Hijaz and all other Arab and Islamic countries. When the royal family felt the great threat from the angry Muslim masses, it published an official royal order and justified its decision to investigate the marriage relationship between the elderly Saudi man and his underage Indian wife. According to the decree, Saudi men are not permitted, according to a previously issued royal decree, to marry non-Saudi women. The royal decree temporarily appeased the angry crowds. However, the masses moved and took to the streets again when a prominent Egyptian Muslim leader publicly condemned the royal family for enacting laws that contradict the blessed Islamic Sharia. The prominent leader is known as Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi. After condemning the royal family, al-Qaradawi issued a fatwa, religious council ruling, demanding that the elderly Saudi man, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed, be allowed to take back his young Indian Muslim wife, Ifat Khan, and transfer her to another Muslim country whose government is not hypocritical. Rather, it follows the law of the Book of God, the Holy Quran, and the Sunnah of his beloved chosen one, the infallible Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace. He even suggested some Muslim countries by name: Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, and Pakistan. It is claimed that this great religious guide, al-Qaradawi, is the one behind all the ongoing revolutions in the Arab countries, which are known as the Arab Spring. He uses the Al Jazeera satellite channel in Doha, Qatar, to incite and move the masses in every Arab country to overthrow their current secular regimes and establish Islamic governments that follow and apply Islamic law. Today, al-Qaradawi is one of the most prominent leaders and pillars of the Muslim Brotherhood. He is working hard to fulfill the dream of the first founders of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb, who wanted to restore the traditional Islamic caliphate to the Muslim world and use Sharia as the only correct form of Muslim rule. This distinguished Egyptian Islamic thinker and spiritual leader graduated from the prestigious Al-Azhar Islamic University in Cairo. So far, his followers have succeeded in overthrowing the secular Tunisian, Egyptian, Libyan, Yemeni, and Sudanese regimes and establishing Islamic governments. If his dream comes true, the Arab Spring will turn into a global nightmare. Chapter 13. The Trial of the Accused in the Child Bride Marriage. The hearing to determine the validity of the marriage between Sheikh Ahmed and his child wife Ifat Khan was held shortly after she was estranged from her husband. The Sharia court wanted to issue a decision on the sensitive issue before public anger got out of control. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi's fatwa created serious problems for the royal family and the judicial system in Saudi Arabia. People protested publicly and demanded the immediate release of the minor Muslim wife into the custody of her legitimate Saudi husband and the freedom to transfer her to any other Islamic country so that he could take her to bed and have sex with her, as he had done before. After issuing the fatwa, Iran called on the old Saudi Muslim husband to bring his Indian Muslim wife to Tehran and live freely together as husband and wife. Somalia also promised to welcome the couple to its territory. The 7 members of the CIA team were allowed to attend the trial with a translator. She is the same Indian girl who translated the interview that Rahana Khan conducted with the late human rights activist Shama Abdul Bari Ahmed. The trial is supposed to take place in Arabic. There are no lawyers in any Sharia court in the Islamic world. Islamic law does not allow any lawyers because in the time of the Prophet Muhammad there were no lawyers. In the interests of justice, the court may allow the accused to summon witnesses and present evidence in his defense. These courts also employ religious judges and assistant judges. In short, Sheikh Ahmed was allowed to present his case. The victim's child, his underage wife Ifat Khan, was also brought to the courtroom. She was detained in a women's prison until the court decided on her status. It is widely expected that if the court announces her marriage to the old Saudi man, she will be deported and handed over to the Indian consulate to be repatriated. But if the court rules in Sheikh Ahmed's favor, she will be returned to his custody as her legal Muslim husband. The court is then supposed to give him a few weeks to make preparations to be sent to another Islamic country. The trial began by asking the suspect to present his line of defense. The child molester, wearing white clothes, appeared before the Sharia judges and the Muslim public as if he was about to perform the Hajj rituals or other sacred religious rituals such as prayer or fasting. He also holds a rosary in his left hand and a green copy of the Holy Quran in his right hand. His long red beard resembles a dirty old broom. He used henna to color his beard, just as the Prophet Muhammad did with his long beard. The good judges and the honorable public, the hunchbacked old man began to tell his story when my Indian maid, Rahana Khan, was arrested by the Jeddah police on charges of public deception, adultery, and detestable bigamy. I had only 2 options regarding her baby daughter, Ifat Khan. Either I return her to her country to her Indian relatives, or I keep her under my care until the Sharia court issues its ruling on her adulterous, depraved mother. I preferred to keep her in my house until the court decided on the charges against her whore and deceitful mother. After the Sharia court of God and his noble messenger convicted her mother of committing the heinous crime of bigamy and sentenced her to stoning until death because she married 2 men at the same time and became pregnant by a 3rd man through adultery. Sheikh Ahmed stopped when he heard the grumbling and shuffling of feet in court. Instead of continuing his words, he suddenly remembered the day he met her beautiful and sexy mother for the first time in India in front of the Taj Mahal Hotel in the Colaba district of downtown Bombay, and decided to share his emotional experience with the court and the public. I did not know that her mother was a prostitute in Bombay and used to cheat men, marry them, and steal their money until the Sharia court in Jeddah convicted her. This is how the Arab lover sugar daddy, Qais al-Majnun, falsified the story of his beautiful Indian lover, Layla, the maid Rahana Khan, and told her before the Sharia court of God and his messenger. He later turned into the old pedophile, grandfather Satan, and kidnapped, raped, starved, beat, and imprisoned her little daughter, Ifat, in a horror palace for 3 years in Eritrea. While I was performing the public Friday prayers at the famous Islamic mosque Haji Ali in the city of Bombay, someone approached me and spoke to me about her Indian servant mother. He was an Indian Muslim. He told me that there was an Indian Muslim widow who had recently lost her husband and had a young daughter. He said that she was very poor and not she has someone to support her and her young daughter. When she became a widow, she started working in the homes of wealthy Hindus. However, because she is a young and beautiful Muslim woman, these Hindu men sexually harassed her and some of them tried to rape her. That is why she stopped going to their homes, because she is a chaste and honorable Muslim woman and valid. I cried and wiped tears from my eyes and my long beard before asking him what I could do to help a poor, righteous Muslim widow. He told me, "You are the only person who can solve her problem." So I told him, "My brother in Islam, only God can solve the problems of the poor. If you want me to give her some money, I'm willing to do that." He told me, "My Arab Muslim brother, that all the money you give her will end one day. But if you can help her find a decent job and make a living from her sweat instead of her thighs, her problem will be solved forever." So I told him how I could give her a respectable job while I was a foreigner in this secular Hindu country. Then he said to me, "Take her with you to your pure and holy Islamic country and make her your servant." Although at that time I had 4 Muslim wives and 4 foreign maids in my country, I agreed to help a poor widowed Indian Muslim woman. I promised the Indian Muslim man who brought her to me and shared her problem with me that as soon as I returned to my country, I would send 2 visas and 2 tickets to the Indian widow and her young Muslim daughter. I didn't want to separate her 7-year-old daughter from her 22-year-old mother. Sheikh Ahmed took out copies of the visas and tickets for Rahana and her daughter Ifat from his bag, raised them, and showed them to the judges and the public. After that, he continued his false story. "I swear by Almighty God and His noble messenger, and I swear on all my 4 Muslim wives that I have not given any Indian man or woman before or after a free visa and bought a ticket for her except that Indian maid and her Muslim daughter. I challenge the court and anyone present here to tell me about any Indian travel agency that issued free visas and tickets to any poor Indian family before or after as I did." Sheikh Ahmed stopped when he heard the audience begin to applaud in appreciation of his generosity and kindness. Then he continued to tell his false story. "I did it because I am a gentlemanly Arab father, and I am also a good Muslim man. I also did it because I did not want a young Muslim woman to raise her daughter by selling her thighs to the cursed Hindu infidels who worship idols instead of the one and only God." The audience clapped their hands again, and some of them chanted 3 times, "God is great." When the roaring stopped, the old man continued his fabricated story. "When that young Indian Muslim widow came to Saudi Arabia, I decided to help her more than I expected. I understood that she was young and beautiful. At that time, I had 2 teenage sons, one 16 and the other 18, at the home of my 4th Saudi wife. I was afraid that my unmarried teenage sons would be tempted by the beauty of the young Indian maid and have forbidden sex with her. So, when she came to my house, I convinced my Pakistani Muslim driver to marry her. I didn't want her to feel like I was forcing her to marry my driver. I shared what was in my heart with her, and she gladly agreed to marry the Pakistani driver." The old Saudi stopped and waited for the audience to cheer, but he was disappointed when no one applauded. He resumed his fabricated story, saying, "Everything I did to my Indian mother-in-law I did with good intentions. I wanted to have a clear conscience. I did not want to stand before God on Judgment Day and tell him that I had left a poor Muslim widow to starve to death in Bombay or sell her body into prostitution to pagan Hindu men to feed her young daughter." This time, some of the attendees stood on their feet and chanted praises to God and their noble messenger, then thanked Sheikh Ahmed. As soon as the crowd stopped screaming and praising him, the old man put his right hand on his chest, raised his left hand, and said in a loud voice, "Once my Indian maid married my Pakistani driver, may God expose her. I didn't know she was a prostitute in Bombay and that the man who brought her to me had cheated me. He may be the man who committed adultery with her and impregnated her." When the police discovered that she had married 2 men in Jeddah at the same time, she was arrested. Imagine a single woman marrying 2 men at the same time and having sex with them, and she did so in less than 20 days. I have never heard of such an obscene act by a Muslim woman in my entire life. We all know that the Holy Quran allows a Muslim man to practice polygamy in Surah An-Nisa 4, Verse 3, but it will not allow a Muslim woman to practice polygamy. Of course, this is a license for men, not women, based on a wisdom that God Almighty alone knows. Even in the countries of the cursed infidels, who allow a man to marry another man and have homosexuality together, and a woman to marry another woman and practice lesbianism. And they also allow their teenage sons and underage daughters to have sex before marriage like animals, they still do not allow polyandry for women. May God protect our Muslim husbands, daughters, and sisters from the evil practices of the accursed Satan practiced by Christians and atheists in Western countries. Chapter 14. The false story continues. Sheikh Ahmed stopped when he heard the Sharia judges and the public cursing Satan and asking God to protect their daughters, sisters, and wives from this evil act that the Indian Muslim maid Rahana Khan did. Jeddah police discovered by chance that she had married these two men without either of them knowing about her bad deed. Moreover, after her arrest, the hospital discovered that she had become pregnant by a third man before marrying these two innocent men in less than a month. When I went to the police and inquired about her, I was told that she is a professional Indian prostitute who roams the city of Jeddah, deceives men, marries them, steals their money, and then escapes from them. Sheikh Ahmed paused again, anticipating a reaction from the court or the public. But when no one said a word or moved his leg, he continued his fabricated story. I was unable to refute the police when they showed me the two versions of her marriage and the pregnancy test result. It appears that she was already pregnant by someone before she left India. Either she was married and lied to me and said her husband died, or she slept with another man and got pregnant by him. Only God knows how she got pregnant. During her interrogation, she lied and falsely claimed that she had been raped by two Saudi policemen upon her arrival in Saudi Arabia, but the Sharia court rejected her claims and sentenced her to stoning to death. Anyway, I kept her daughter in my house and waited until the Sharia court found her guilty of the serious crimes of marrying two men at the same time and getting pregnant by a third man without marriage. The court sentenced her to death by stoning for committing the abhorrent crime of polygamy. When I learned that the Indian mother would be punished according to our blessed law and that she would never return to my home, I faced the responsibility of her little Muslim daughter. At first I decided to adopt her daughter, but then I remembered that our holy Quran forbids adoption. Then I decided to return it to India. I contacted the address mentioned in the daughter's passport and her mother's passport. I discovered it was a fake address. The people living at that address were Arab foreign students from Palestine and Jordan studying at the University of Bombay. I spoke to them personally on the phone and learned that they had been living in that apartment for more than 3 years. Here are copies of my Indian wife Ifat Khan's passport and her mother Rahana Khan's passport. If anyone doubts my claim, contact the address and prove me wrong. However, I decided to send my Indian maid's daughter with my Pakistani driver to India. She thought he might find her Muslim family members in Bombay and hand her over to them. Unfortunately, the Indian consulate rejected my driver's application for a visit visa because he is Pakistani. Indian Hindus believe that every Pakistani Muslim is a terrorist and their enemy. Here is a copy of my Pakistani driver Sabir Ibrahim Shah's passport, and here is the rejection stamp from the Indian consulate. The court can get this copy and verify my words. Then I spoke to the Indian consulate staff and begged them to help me find the family of the little girl of my Indian maid who had been sentenced to death by stoning. None of them were willing to help me. I knew that neither a Saudi family nor an Indian family in Jeddah would agree to keep a young daughter in their home. After all the doors were closed in my face, I decided to share the problem of the little Indian girl with my wife and children. I did not want to do anything that might cause trouble for the poor little girl and make my face ugly before God and the people around me. One of my 4 wives asked me to keep the girl with her as her servant. So I told her, first of all, the girl was too young to be employed as a maid. At that time, the girl was 8 years old. Secondly, I told her, if you allowed the girl to stay with you, how would you protect her from your 2 teenage sons, Khaled and Tariq? She has one son who is 16 years old and another boy who is 18 years old. Of course, The little girl will grow up one day and may tempt my son and cause them to fall into the sin of adultery or rape. Therefore, I rejected the advice of my fourth wife, Mastora. It was my late first wife, Khadija, may God have mercy on her, who gave me the right advice. She told me, either you tell one of your sons to marry the poor Indian girl, or you have to marry her yourself. So I asked her how my son could marry her when Saudi law prohibits a Saudi man from marrying a foreigner, even if she is a Muslim. Then she told me to marry her yourself and leave her in another country. At first I rejected the advice. However, when I remembered that I travel frequently to some Asian and African Islamic countries for my work, I accepted the wise advice of my esteemed first wife, Khadija, may God have mercy on her. At that time, I had 4 virtuous Muslim wives, and Sharia did not allow me to have a 5th wife. I can only treat the Indian maid's daughter as a Yemenite queen and keep her as my slave. In this case, Islam permits me to have intercourse with her as a slave without marriage, as our noble prophet did with his 2 slave girls, Maria the Copt and Rayhana bint Amr. But I was afraid that people would blame me and accuse me of cohabiting with the daughter of a foreign woman without marriage. I shared my problem with my 4 wives again. I did not want to divorce one of them and marry a young Indian Muslim girl. My first wife, who advised me to marry a young foreign girl, volunteered herself. At the time, she was old and dying on her deathbed from incurable cancer. By the way, even though my wife had been ill for 2 years and I couldn't sleep with her, I kept my sanctity hanging on my ropes. My old wife, Khadija, the invalid, said exactly what the wife of our holy prophet Muhammad, the arrogant old woman, Sauda bint Zameh, said about her old age. The old wife, Sauda, donated her night to the young wife, Aisha, because she had grown old and was no longer able to enjoy sex with her husband, the messenger, and she dedicated her night to the beloved of our prophet, his bride, the child, Aisha bint Abi Bakr. Likewise, my first wife, the elderly Sheikha Khadija bint Salah, gave her wedding night to the young Indian girl, Ifat Khan. So, I listened to her wise advice and divorced her. 2 days later, my blessed first wife died and went to her Lord, and of course he made her dwell in his spacious paradise. The truth is that the first wife, Khadija bint Salah, entered a coma when she heard her evil husband divorcing her while she was on her deathbed. She did not come out of that coma, and the next day she died, and according to him, she died of fetish. Sheikh Ahmed waited for appreciation from the court, but it seemed that no one believed his latest lie. After I got the right advice from my first wife and divorced her, I started working on the next step. I realized that the law of my country would not allow me to marry a foreign Indian girl, even if she was Muslim, so I decided to follow the wise advice of my first wife. I learned that our blessed Sharia does not prevent a Saudi from marrying a non-Saudi woman. So, I decided to take the poor and orphaned Indian girl to a Muslim country that allows Muslim men and women to marry each other regardless of color, race, and age. Sheikh Ahmed was forced to stop his false narrative for a while when the audience clapped their hands. However, it was observed that the 5 religious judges did not clap their hands, most likely because the old man struck a chord regarding a law put in place by the royal family that prevents the marriage of foreign women, even if they are Muslim. I knew that other Islamic countries such as Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Indonesia, Somalia, Sudan, and Eritrea would allow a Muslim man to marry a Muslim woman regardless of her age, race, and color. The old man again paused for the effect of his words, but nothing came forward. All of these 7 blessed Islamic countries implement the law of God and the sunnah of his noble messenger to the fullest extent. However, this time, his speech was interrupted by audience applause, even though he did not expect the appreciation to occur. Also, this time one of the 5 judges took a calculated risk and lightly slammed his hands on his table. The old man saw that his words had a good effect on one of his judges, which was a good sign. I decided to take my future Indian bride to one of those Islamic countries and marry her according to the law of the Book of God, the Holy Quran, and the Sunnah of his Prophet, the Chosen One and the infallible Muhammad. May God bless him and grant him peace. I didn't want to be selfish and decide for my future bride which country she should live in. For this reason, I wrote each Islamic country on a piece of paper, folded the papers, and asked them to choose one. I picked up the paper with the country of Eritrea on it. I have never been to Eritrea and would never have gone there if you had not chosen that great Islamic country. This was not because I do not like visiting an Islamic land, but because of the language barrier. Since I promised God and His noble prophet that I would take her there and marry her in any country my fiancé chose, I accepted her choice. I did not travel on the same plane with her because she was not my wife yet. Moreover, I decided not to stay in the same hotel room as her because that is against our law. I decided to memorize the commandment of our noble prophet, which says, "If a man and a woman are alone, Satan will be the third among them." I booked her on one plane and booked myself on another plane. When we arrived in Asmara, the capital of the blessed Islamic country of Eritrea, I married her according to the book of the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of our infallible Prophet Muhammad. May God bless him and grant him peace. Chapter 15. When the two thieves disagree, their lies are exposed. For the first time since the old man began telling his false story, one of the judges had to interrupt him and ask for some clarification. How did the airline allow an 8-year-old girl to fly alone? As far as I know, no airline will allow a minor girl to travel from one country to another without an adult accompanying her. Sheikh Ahmed knew about this serious problem, but he thought that no one would notice it. He did not want to contradict himself by allowing a man to travel with a girl who was not his wife. Moreover, he did not want to introduce his Pakistani pimp at this early stage of his made-up story. But the smart judge put him on the hot seat and had to explain before his fake story was accepted. Thank you, blessed judge, for reminding me of something particularly important that I had forgotten to mention. As you all know, our blessed Islamic law did not allow a virgin woman to marry a man without a guardian or guardian, except in the case of her father's death. The intelligent judge who had asked the question and the other 4 judges felt that they were being scandalized by the suspect when the old man reminded them of a particularly important question that they had failed to ask from the beginning. I forgot to mention that I need a guardian to marry a virgin Indian Muslim girl in a halal Islamic marriage. One of the religious judges thought to ask him how she knew that she was a virgin before marrying her. But then he ignored his ridiculous question when he remembered that the girl in question was an 8-year-old child at the time. One of the religious judges thought to ask him how he knew that she was a virgin before marrying her. But then he ignored his ridiculous question when he remembered that the girl in question was an 8-year-old child at the time. Since the Indian girl does not have a male relative to be her guardian, I decided to appoint a good Muslim man for her to be her guardian and marry her to me. I was not able to go to prison and ask her mother for permission because our blessed Islamic law said, a woman is absolutely not qualified to conclude a marriage contract, whether for herself or for another woman, even if her guardian gives her permission to do so. A father may contract the marriage of his virgin daughter to any Muslim man he wishes without asking for her consent, regardless of her age. I did not know any male relative of the little Indian Muslim girl, Ifat Khan, so that I could ask his permission before I entered into a halal Islamic marriage with her. I was about to give up on the idea of marrying her when I discovered that I could not marry her legally without a male relative. Our honorable Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, said that if a Muslim woman marries without a guardian, she is an adulteress. Therefore, I did not want to turn her into a prostitute like her mother was a prostitute, and that is why she went to prison and was convicted of stoning. Therefore, I was in a dilemma. If I married her without a guardian, my marriage contract with her might be invalid, and I would have committed adultery with her. If I do not marry her, I will expose her and my children to the risk of adultery or rape. While I was thinking about solving this difficult dilemma, my loyal Pakistani driver came forward, hit his chest with his right hand, and proudly said, I will be her guardian and I will marry her to you according to the Book of God and the Sunnah of his Prophet. The lying old man stopped telling his false story and looked around. The faces of the crowd and the judges gave him a boo, and one of them gave him the middle finger. No one in court praised what his Pakistani Muslim driver did. Not because what he said is not praiseworthy, but because they are all Arabs and hate Pakistani Muslims. If he had said, "My Arab driver said that I will be her guardian and marry her to you," they would have applauded for 10 minutes or more. The simple truth of Arab life is that they look down upon non-Arab Muslims. They consider themselves to be gods on earth, such as the Hindu Brahmins, who have a sacred religious position in Hinduism, which makes them consider themselves to be human gods on earth. On the other hand, some Indian Muslims consider themselves more honorable or noble and believe that they are direct descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, and they look with contempt at others. Other Indian Muslims. Like vultures and scoundrels, Indian Muslims created their own caste system that divided them into 3 classes. 1. The Ashrafs, nobles. 2. The Ajlafs, slaves. And 3. The Arazals, untouchables. Muslims of the last class have a status like the outcast Hindus in India. They are not allowed to enter mosques to pray, and they are not allowed to touch the books of the Holy Quran. Therefore, one of the Arab judges interrupted the old man out of hatred for Pakistani Muslims and asked him a very difficult question. Neither the judge who asked the question nor the old man expected the seriousness of the question. It is a slippery question that changed the course of the trial and created a major rift between the old Saudi man and his loyal Pakistani pimp, who allegedly volunteered to be the guardian of the Indian child, Ifat Khan. As we will soon see, this question will make the 2 thieves disagree sharply with each other and reveal their lies. The angry Saudi judge wanted to know why Sheikh Ahmed had not convinced his loyal Pakistani driver to marry the young Indian girl and spare himself all the trouble he had to go through to marry her. The foolish old man could easily answer this thorny question by saying that Sharia law would not allow his Pakistani driver to marry the Indian Muslim child Ifat Khan because he had already married her mother Rahana Khan. However, he inadvertently implicated himself by saying that he already had the idea in mind and had spoken to his Pakistani driver about the possibility of marrying the daughter of his Indian maid who had been convicted of stoning. But his honest and trustworthy Muslim driver refused to marry her for personal reasons. The stubborn judge was not satisfied with the vague answer and demanded to know the exact personal issue that prevented the sincere Pakistani Muslim driver from marrying the young orphaned Indian girl. At this critical stage of the trial, the cunning old man still had a chance to escape from the jaws of the difficult question, but he missed the opportunity again and fell into another dangerous trap. Instead of referring to the sham marriage on paper to his wife's Indian child mother and his foreign Muslim pimp, he said his loyal Pakistani driver told him that he did not have what other men had. The adamant judge asked the accused Sheikh Ahmed to speak clearly to the court of God and his noble prophet and to tell them exactly what his honest and trustworthy Pakistani driver told him. The old man's memory was lost and he forgot that his Pakistani driver, the pimp, was present in court. He said that his foreign driver, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, told him that he was a eunuch. He was castrated by some evil Muslim men when he was in Pakistan, hence he decided to marry a Muslim woman and deprive her of what every wife should get from her husband. All 5 Muslim judges spoke their opinions together as if they were a team of singers. So how did your Pakistani Muslim driver, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, marry her Indian Muslim mother, Rahana Khan, and have sexual intercourse with her, thus consummating his marriage with her in bed before she was arrested on the 2nd day after their marriage contract? The old man's memory was lost and he forgot that his Pakistani driver, the pimp, was present in court. He said that his foreign driver, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, told him that he was a eunuch. He was castrated by some evil Muslim men when he was in Pakistan, hence he decided not to marry a Muslim woman and deprive her of what every wife should get from her husband. All 5 Muslim judges spoke their opinions together as if they were a team of singers. So how did your Pakistani Muslim driver, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, marry her Indian Muslim mother, Rahana Khan, and have sexual intercourse with her, thus consummating his marriage with her in bed before she was arrested on the second day after their marriage contract. The religious judges had done their Islamic school duties well before coming to the courtroom. They studied well the merits of her Indian Muslim mother's case, which led to her being convicted of polygamy, adultery, and stoning therefore. They already knew that the mother of the child bride had been sentenced to death by stoning because she had committed the abhorrent sin of bigamy with two Muslim men, one of whom was an Indian named Aslam and the other was a Pakistani named Sabir. This means that she had sex with two men at the same time within 3 weeks, which is a serious violation of the true Islamic law. Only God's favorite creature, the man, can practice polygamy with 4 women and have sex with them at the same time. The foolish Sheikh Ahmed made another grave mistake. He took out from his bag a medical certificate issued by a Pakistani doctor who has a medical clinic in the city of Jeddah, proving that Saber Ibrahim Shah is a castrated man who can never have an erection, even if Miss World stands completely naked in front of him. Therefore, his driver told him that he could not marry any woman because he could not have sex with her as his wife. But in doing so, the foolish old man shot himself in the foot and exposed his evil deeds and lies. When Pakistani pimp Sabir first learned he was a castrated man, a mystery that had puzzled him for 3 years was solved. He remembered that the day he married the beautiful Indian Muslim Rayhana Khan and slept with her in the same room, he tried to have sex with her, but he could not. Rayhana even invited him to have sex with her before the old Arab man, Sugar Daddy, came and violated her, but he couldn't. She tried everything he asked her to do to stimulate him sexually and make his penis erect, but he couldn't get an erection. She even sucked and licked his penis with her mouth and tongue like a lollipop or an ice cream cone, but to no avail. His Muslim wife, Rayhana, told him, "You are my legal Muslim husband, and therefore you have the right to have sex with me, not the lustful, shameless old man." Saber also remembered what happened to him when the adulterous, unfaithful, and ugly Saudi wife, Mrs. Ahmed, tried to have sex with him that day in the room and bed of his Saudi sponsor, and he was unable to have sex with her either. That's why she got so angry at him, hit him, bit him, and was about to eat him alive and kill him if he couldn't escape from her. He also mentioned that he tried several times to have forceful sex with the underage Indian wife, Ifat Khan, in the absence of her Arab husband, Grandpa Satan, and her attacker, Sheikh Ahmed, but he failed to achieve an erection every time he tried to rape her. Finally, the Pakistani pimp concluded that God had cursed him with a great curse and turned him into a sexually impotent young man because of the evils he had committed against the 2 innocent Indian women, Rayhana Khan and her little girl, Ifat Khan. However, when the elderly Saudi man took out a medical report from a Pakistani doctor from his bag and presented it to the Sharia court, Saber understood who had castrated him. Then he understood why the old man trusted him to stay alone with Rayhana and Ifat. Why did his evil master allow him to sleep with the beautiful young Indian woman in the same bedroom on the day of his fake secret marriage to her? And why did he allow him to live with his child bride in the same house during his absence for 3 years? He knows that the Arab man will not trust his father and brother with his wife. Therefore, the despicable pimp, Sabir Ibrahim Shah, became so angry that he was unable to speak when he got up and opened his despicable mouth. The chief judge angrily shouted at him and asked him if he had anything useful to say. When he opened his mouth again and was somehow able to speak, it was as if a bomb had suddenly been dropped inside the crowded courtroom by an angry Muslim terrorist, or he had detonated an explosive device from an explosive belt that was tied around his waist and buttocks. He said that everything his Saudi sponsor told before the Sharia court today was just lies. He admitted that Sheikh Fayez bin Ahmed was the one who forced him to marry Rayhana Khan on paper only, without having sex with her even once, because he wanted to sleep with her himself and make her his secret concubine. He was the one who forced him to convince the Indian maid to sleep with him, which he did. Sheikh Ahmed is the wealthy Arab sugar daddy who spent a lot of money to bring the beautiful and sexy Indian woman Rayhana Khan from the city of Bombay to the city of Jeddah because he was madly in love with her. He called her the beautiful Indian Layla and claimed that he loved her madly like the crazy K's. He was the one who deceived him and sent him to the corrupt Pakistani doctor in his clinic in Jeddah and castrated him without his consent and knowledge because he was afraid that he would have sex with Rayhana before him. Then the angry Pakistani pimp turned to the testimony of grandfather Satan Sheikh Ahmed about the little girl Ifat Khan and began to dismantle it, tearing it apart layer by layer. Sabir Ibrahim Shah told the Sharia court of God and his prophet Muhammad the story of the imprisoned maid Rayhana Khan and her little daughter Ifat from the time they arrived at Jeddah International Airport until their sponsor found them in the beauty salon for beautiful Filipino women. He said that he was with his Saudi sponsor and drove his car to that beauty salon, which is located on the outskirts of the city of Jeddah. He also told the court what happened to Ifat Khan since the day her mother, Rayhana, was arrested and falsely accused by Jeddah police of being married to two husbands at the same time. He admitted that he did not marry Rihanna in reality, but rather it was just a sham marriage that took place on paper. It was just a fake marriage, meant to cover Sheikh Ahmed's ulterior motive. The Saudi sponsor wanted to keep the beautiful young maid, Rayhana, as his secret mistress or concubine, and then he could commit adultery with her without marriage. But she was captured before the old man could rape her. After that, the Pakistani pimp admitted in court that he was the one who helped Sheikh Ahmed's two sons smuggle a surveillance camera into their home. He also said that he installed the camera in the women's bathroom to blame Ms. Mastora. The two sons videotaped the Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, while she was bathing After that, the Pakistani pimp admitted in court that he was the one who helped Sheikh Ahmed's two sons smuggle a surveillance camera into their home. He also said that he installed the camera in the women's bathroom of their mother Mrs. Mastora Ahmed. The two sons videotaped the Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, while she was bathing completely naked. Rayhana was dancing naked and masturbating in their strict mother's bathroom. Then the two evil boys used the pornographic video of the naked Indian maid to blackmail her and have group sex with her inside the small warehouse where she was orphaned with her child, Ifat. Saber told the court that he strongly believed that the illegitimate child conceived and born by the Indian maid in prison was the son of one of Sheikh Ahmed's teenage sons, Khalid and Tariq. Then the eyewitness Saber told the Sharia court the sad story of the Indian girl, Ifat Khan. While crying, he told how the evil old Saudi man raped her and imprisoned her in his palace in the capital of Eritrea for 3 years. He frankly admitted that he cooperated with the evil old man in all the evils he committed against his underage Indian child bride. He said that he was the governor of Ifat and signed the marriage contract because his Saudi sponsor forced him to do so. He also informed the court that he lived for 3 years in Sheikh Ahmed's house in Asmara city and kept the little Indian girl imprisoned in the 4 corners of the old man's huge mansion. His confession made the 7 members of the CIA team shed hot tears as if they had never cried before. With his confession of participation in Sheikh Ahmed's crimes, the public began to become very angry with him, but none of them shed a single tear for the Indian mother convicted of stoning, Rayhana, or her daughter, the child wife, Ifat. And his testimony did not touch the hearts of the judges of the Sharia court. Unfortunately, Sabir Ibrahim Shah's confession did not convince any of the 5 judges of the Islamic Sharia court to invalidate the marriage contract between Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed and the child bride, Ifat Khan. Sharia judges collectively rejected Saber's confession and testimony against his Saudi sponsor because he participated in the marriage contract and volunteered to be the guardian of the orphaned Indian girl, Ifat Khan. Moreover, he had taken care of the wife in question for 3 years. Therefore, he is considered a false witness. He became accused of being a false witness and slanderer who presented to God's court a false confession that harmed the reputation of a Saudi Muslim sheikh. He is also convicted of providing a false and malicious statement about his Saudi sponsor. According to the Quran, whoever gives false testimony according to Islamic law must be flogged with 80 lashes, and his testimony will not be accepted again. As written in the laws of the Islamic country, the Holy Land of Hijaz, Sabir Ibrahim Shah was sentenced to 80 lashes. In addition, the The court ordered his deportation to his country of origin, Pakistan, after the sentence was issued and executed. The Sharia court also banned him from visiting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia again, even if it was to perform the Hajj, in the two holy cities of Mecca and Medina, circumambulate the house of God 7 times, and stone the accursed Satan. However, after sentencing Saber, the court ruled in favor of Sheikh Ahmed, the devil, the evil grandfather. His marriage to the Indian girl, Ifat, was considered valid and did not violate Islamic law in any way. According to the Sharia court, the Indian girl, Ifat Khan, was married when she was 8 years old when the old Saudi Sheikh Ahmed married her following the Holy Quran and the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. Therefore, the Sharia court in Jeddah issued a ruling allowing the husband, Sheikh Fayez bin Ahmed, to take his Indian wife, Ifat Khan, to another Muslim country of his choice and continue his halal married life with her, and both of them live as husband and wife.